You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. My name's Joe George. If you're listening to the audio feed, come on over. We are here live after every single Bulls, Bears, Cubs, and Notre Dame football game. The Bulls win 115-108 in their first overtime game of the season against the Charlotte Hornets. It was an ugly basketball game tonight. The Bulls shoot a record 60 threes in this game. They couldn't hit anything in this game. We'll talk about the game as a whole, getting to overtime, the win in overtime. The question of the night, I think, is why do they keep shooting these threes when the Charlotte Hornets were terrible, but the Bulls couldn't hit anything either? And maybe this game is a look into the future of what life will be like right around the corner without Zach LaVine once he eventually is traded, most likely, by the Chicago Bulls. So an ugly win. I cannot believe that game had to go to overtime after everything that we saw. Look, the Bulls were 1 for 15 to start the game. When Patrick Williams hit his three, it ended a 13-3 streak at that point in the game. That's terrible. 13 straight missed threes. 1 for 15. I mean, Nope. It wasn't Steph Curry. It looked like Steph Curry. Seth Curry had the first 12 points of this game. Look, in the fourth quarter there, Coby White finally, for the first time this game, stops just taking up terrible threes for the most part. He still did that in overtime, but he finally started attacking the basket, which helped the Bulls really get things, to the end there in the fourth quarter. A really, bizarre lucky three there from Bridges where he goes up and under Patrick Williams, just throws up the three. He gets it. The Bulls go to overtime. And look, they kind of ran away with this thing very quickly. They were hitting shots. Charlotte was not. Charlotte was terrible tonight. This might be the worst team in the NBA, especially without LaMelo Ball out there. They're terrible. And the fact that it took you to go to overtime, even without Zach LaVine, is atrocious for the Chicago Bulls. But Patrick Williams gets a season-high 5 threes in the game in his home state. That's really one of the most positive things about this game was how Patrick Williams was shooting the ball, because the fact that, and then Torrey Craig, a franchise high, not a career high, I don't believe for him, but Torrey Craig, his most points ever as a member of the Bulls, he was hitting clutch shots in the fourth quarter. Really fascinating that he was one of the guys closing in this game, and Josh Giddey, again, not on the court. Like we saw in the last one, in the closing group, in the Bulls' last game, Giddey was the guy closing. Tonight, they said screw it with Lonzo Ball's minutes restrictions, which I appreciate, because as long as he's a member of the Bulls, which I hope is the rest of the season, I hope what Adam Amin, mentioned there at the end of the broadcast, that Charlotte is a potential deadline destination for Lonzo Ball, I hope that's not the case. I hope he stays as a member of the Bulls. He's plus 24 tonight in the score box, in the box score. He's the guy the Bulls need. Like the way he plays, the style he plays. Thought it was interesting, too, how Casey Johnson mentioned that Lonzo Ball told him this is really the first time that he's able to fully do the follow-through with his jump shot, kind of leading to his, the speculation, the issues with the three. But this is a terrible, terrible basketball game. But Patrick Williams, like I said, he hits his season-high 5 threes. Torrey Craig was clutch. We saw Vooch have a couple good moments in this game. Another double-double. He's third all-time, which is crazy to me, in double-doubles against this franchise. But this game started off so slow. Like I said, Seth Curry, the first 12 points of this game. They had some bad plays. As much as I like Lonzo, you got to point out the bad, too. When it was 18-11, and he tossed the ball to a Hornets defender after a bucket, who then went and got the and one. He missed the free throw to put the Hornets up 20-11. I thought that thing was going to be over. They go on a 13-0 run right to the start of the game. The Charlotte Hornets do it 16-9. Just a disastrous start. They scored 15 points in the first quarter. That's their lowest scoring quarter of the entire season. So you're playing this terrible basketball team, and you're playing worse. These teams, both, I don't even know. I'm going to guess here. They shot combined less than 50%. They shot combined 53.3% from the three-point line tonight. The Bulls and Hornets went 28 of 103 from the three-point line tonight. My gosh, that's not 53%. That's 28%. I just looked at their percentages and combined them. I'm terrible at math. I so apologize for that. That's so embarrassing. But the Bulls win 115-108. And look, they overcame that terrible start. They went on a couple nice runs in this game. They had an 8-0 run, an 11-0 run. And really, the shooting was better in the second quarter. But besides that, like they just couldn't stop shooting the threes all over the place. And I think the reason why they won this game at the end of the day is really because of what Coby White did there in the fourth and what Torrey Craig did in overtime. Because without those two guys to finally go in, like we actually saw like both teams kind of come along there at the end of the fourth quarter where, teams that couldn't, shoot at all of a sudden were going back and forth and up and down the court really quickly and putting the ball into the bucket, attacking the rim. The Bulls really, they played good defense tonight. Like, they were even trying to point out the assist numbers. Well, you're not going to have more than 3 assists in the first quarter when every single time you put up a shot, it's clanking off the rim. It literally, like, a lid on the rim literally looked like that tonight. I cannot believe how many times they were just jacking up these shots. And everything that was working so well for them in the previous game by attacking the rim, they just decided to go away from in this game. Really kind of a bizarre thing that without Zach LaVine on the court, you're just like, yeah, we're just going to keep jacking up shots and just keep trying our best to outshoot this team. If the Charlotte Hornets were not the worst team in the NBA, the Bulls might have lost this game by 30 points. Like, that's just the reality of it. When you shoot this poorly, when you shoot 30%, when you take 63s in a game, I mean, once again, we're on record watch for the most missed threes in a basketball game. It's 47. I don't believe they passed that tonight. They ended up with, 42 missed threes in this game? 42 missed threes in this game. So they were close. Like, it took overtime, but they're 42 missed threes. Stop shooting them. Like, for the love of God, like, just stop. And the fact that Billy Donovan is having to call timeouts because Charlotte's going on these runs, it's just bad basketball. And this can't be, like, I don't think this is indicative of who they are. This is just a terrible night. But what it is indicative of is a team and group of players that are I think stubborn is the right word in the way that they play basketball, that they are so committed to this style sometimes. And I think also we're seeing when they play these bad teams that maybe even though like they're now 15 and 18 on the year, that they take them so unserious, their opponents, that they really just kind of throw everything out the window, and they just start playing basketball without no real rhyme or reason. We saw a lot of times this game where, Vooch or someone or Patrick Williams or Jalen Smith is getting the ball in the post, and everyone's just kind of standing there. Even Josh Giddey, who is not a great three-point shooter, is just standing there in the corner, and it's like, just cut to the basket. Like do something that's a basketball move to try to get a bucket in this game, and they just really, throughout the entire game, chose not to. And I don't really get why in the fourth it took that long for Coby White to start attacking the paint the way he did. We saw him get his first dunk of the season, which that kind of blew my mind. I also didn't realize he only had 14 last year, but it was his first dunk of the season. You need more of that. Like, it was so obvious in the last game to then have this follow-up performance as, your last game of 2024. My gosh, just what an absolute stinker the Bulls laid tonight. But hey, they got the win. Like, that's what's going to happen sometimes when you play terrible basketball teams, is you find a way to win these games no matter what your performance looks like. In a night where you shoot 63s and you make 18 of them, I guess you take what you can get and you take a win as it is, as you're currently constructed. But really just an overall a piss poor performance from shooting the basketball. And really it wasn't great, from the interior. I think Coby White really is the best example of what we saw in this game tonight. Coby White goes 1 for 11 from the three-point line, so he goes 7 for 13 from inside the three-point line. Just do more of that. Like, that's not, you don't have to be a basketball genius to realize that, taking 11 threes and only hitting one of them is a bad idea when you're 7 for 13 the rest of the game. I mean, like 8 of 24 is still pretty bad shooting, but it's all coming from one large spot. And we saw it there in overtime where like he attacks the rim, he gets the bucket, it starts overtime on a real positive note. And then the next possession after Charlotte misses their hoop, he comes down, takes a step back three, it clanks off the rim. And thankfully, like I said, Charlotte's a terrible basketball team and didn't score on their first 3 or 4 possessions of overtime to help you get the win against the Charlotte Hornets. So why do they keep shooting the threes? Like, what's really going on? Because I have a couple theories about like why this is happening and why we're seeing a game like this happen tonight against the Charlotte Hornets, the last game of 2024. We'll get into that next here on the Locked On Bulls postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments of erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor's visits or pharmacy visits. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get a trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you can get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX. Make better sex made simple. So why does it take so long for Coby White specifically, and really the rest of this team, to stop taking these threes when they're not going in? Look, when you start the game 1 for 15 from the three-point line, when you've missed 13 straight threes in the first quarter going into the second quarter, why not stop? Why not pivot? Like, who is calling the shots for this? There's a couple theories, like watching this game, that they're just going on in my mind. The first one is the players don't care what Billy Donovan has to say. That they are going to play the style of basketball that they want to play, that they are going to not pivot when things are not going well, that they're just going to keep jacking up shots and hope that they get hot at some point this game. And if it wasn't for Torrey Craig, hitting his threes and having his best performance as a member of the Chicago Bulls, they probably lose this game, honestly. Like, even with Coby White, finally attacking the rim in the fourth quarter. So that's the first theory, is that the Bulls the players are stubborn, and they're just going to keep jacking them up, and they're not going to cut to the basket, and they're not going to do the things that can work for them. Because, we've seen it work this season, where they can play, they can attack in the paint, they can have success. And we saw it in the last game that the Bulls won before tonight's game. I mean, they were just a much better team in the paint. They outscored their opponent in the paint. They outscored the Bucks in the paint. That's a huge accomplishment, even without Giannis Antetokounmpo out there on the floor. So that's really the first one that is kind of in my mind as I'm watching this game. The other one is that Billy Donovan in the front office, they're telling the players, just keep shooting, just keep going. I mean, the phrasing is shooters going to shoot, but right now for a night like this, it's bricklayers going to lay bricks. Like they just had no interest in pivoting off of what was not working for them. And I just don't quite understand how you can play a basketball game. And look, to their credit, they're down 6 at halftime. They were down 11 points is the most they were down because Charlotte can't shoot the ball either. They were worse than the Bulls tonight. They took less threes, but they were worse. They shot, 23% from the three-point line. So why not just stop? Why not go to Vooch more? On a night when Zach LaVine's not on the court and Vooch is on your team, why not just shoot the ball more? And we're going to talk about this in the next segment, because as I'm watching this game unfold, I'm just what are they going to do when Vooch isn't here? When Vooch and LaVine are both traded and they're shooting like this, what is their answer or solution going to be in this game? Now, I'm hoping that a night like tonight for Patrick Williams specifically is something he can actually build off of. It's not just because he was feeling it being back in his home state. Coby White clearly feeling it too, being back in the Carolinas. Didn't work as well for him as it did for Patrick Williams. But if Vooch is not going to be the guy to primarily get the ball and be, focusing on, just putting the offense through him, Jalen Smith as well, when those guys are on the court and you can't shoot, then I'm really I'm kind of terrified of what we're just going to potentially be watching in a couple months here, in a month and a half. I mean, it's our last show of 2024. Our next show will be on New Year's Day, as I'm trying to watch 2 games at once and then get ready for 2 postcast shows, because we will be live after Notre Dame plays Georgia. But if they just prioritize Vooch, and Zach says it here in the chat, and I totally agree, the team plays better when they prioritize getting Vooch the ball. They 100% do. And they just chose not to do that tonight. And you would just think that as like they're just clanking off the rim, and really it's like they're not like going in and out and having bad luck. They're just taking shots that are largely terrible decisions. Like they're not just that they're open. Yes, they are open, but there's a reason why they're open. There's a reason why Charlotte is not closing out hard on some of these guys, or there's a reason why, you're in transition and you shouldn't be shooting these threes that they're taking, and they're still just taking them. So I just don't quite get why this is the strategy of the Bulls, or why they don't stop, because I think all of us are watching this game tonight, just watching these threes just miss left and right. And look, you're 15-18, like you're almost a 500 basketball team. I think it's you play the Wizards next, so you'll be 2 games below 500 as most likely as the year starts. And it's just like Zach LaVine will be back with his, broken or not broken toe, his bruised toe apparently. That's extremely purple because apparently he felt the need to show everyone that was there. He's like my 3-year-old son when he's got a boo-boo, just showing me what's going on. No offense, Zach. But like, why not stop? I don't quite get what the strategy or the plan is, or why nobody stops. Like I just don't get why Coby White, after having, specifically Coby White, like with how bad the season has gone for him shooting the basketball, that why after having a little success in really 2 games, I would say, in a row, attacking the basket, and again in the fourth quarter and into overtime, attacking the paint really well, his size doesn't matter. He can draw fouls like we saw in overtime. He falls pretty hard in overtime, that's for sure. That guy hits the court as hard as anyone we've seen for the Bulls in a while, it feels like. But I just stop. It's really not that complicated to me, because thankfully the Bulls did go on these runs where they had an 8-0 run and an 11-0 run in this game to get them back into these games. And then on top of that, when you're playing a team like the Hornets, it's not just stopping shooting the threes. Letting Seth Curry start the game on a 12-0 run is embarrassing. I mean, his season high was 18 points. He ended up with 17, so he only scored 5 points after that start. But my buddy Zach was telling me before the game his over-under prop bet was 9.5 points for the game, and he got it in the first 12 points. Like, he scored the first 12, and like it was terrible defense, and just totally unaware of where he's at. And Stacey King keeps saying it, and feels like he's just going to say it the rest of the year. It's just KYP. Know your personnel. Know where Seth Curry is at. I hate that there's 2 Curry brothers, and his dad's on the broadcast. It's so confusing. But like, they're not aware of a guy that can put up buckets in a moment like this. And at least he wasn't the one to send it to overtime, because that might have actually infuriated me. And the Bulls can't do a lot to infuriate me the way this season has gone so far. They just make my eyes bleed, I think is the best way to put it, watching a game like tonight. But look, they won the game. Like at the end of the day, if you're looking for wins, if you're not super pro tank and you're trying to enjoy as many wins as you can before the Bulls really join the Bears and White Sox and Blackhawks as the worst teams in their leagues, then tonight is a fine night. For the pro tank crowd, I think we got a real look at what the second half of the season is going to look like for the Chicago Bulls. So we're going to talk about that, because there are observations from this game specifically with Zach LaVine out, where you got the win, yes, but just couple things that happened in this game that I already am just kind of do want to see, good and bad, from this game without Zach LaVine, and what it will mean, going forward for the Chicago Bulls. We'll get into that next here on the Locked On Bulls postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. All right, so no Zach LaVine in this game. He will be back for Wednesday's game, barring like any setbacks or whatever. But like assuming he told Casey Johnson that he'll be back for the game on Wednesday night. But look, this is kind of an insight, and they've played a couple games now. I think this is their fourth or fifth game without LaVine on the year. But this at this point in the season now, as we get closer and closer to the deadline, and with rumors floating around about Vooch, Lonzo, and LaVine all potentially being traded this year, this is kind of a real insight to what the Chicago Bulls will look like without Zach LaVine. And so there's a couple things that I want to point out. The first one is something I said earlier in the show that I want to revisit here. I hope they don't trade Lonzo Ball. I don't know, past his 15 to 18 minutes, how often he will go like he did tonight. He ended up with 26 minutes on the night. That's his most minutes he's played in a basketball game in now a couple of years. I don't know how often they'll be willing to do that, specifically if they're really considering trading him. If he's not traded, I would imagine like things will be different post-deadline, that we will see, Lonzo play some more minutes for this team. But I don't want them to trade Lonzo Ball because I think the young players on this team, Modest Buzelis, Josh Giddey, Ayo, Coby White, they can learn something from Lonzo. Like the way he plays this game, and we saw it tonight, being plus 25 in the box score, one of the best nights of the season for him. And he's, Adam Amin pointed out in this broadcast, he's plus minus in almost every single game he's played this year. In the 4 that he's not, they're 2-2, and the 2 losses were against the Boston Celtics. So he's all over the place in terms of just being such a positive basketball player for this team, what he brings defensively, if the shot can get going now that his wrist is better after being sick, he said. So if that can get going too, it can just be even more. And again, you traded for Josh Giddey, and you chose not to close with him to have Ayo on the court. Now, Lonzo Ball, they're not worried about his minutes restriction tonight, apparently. The other night, they were worried about it, so Josh Giddey got to close that game. Josh Giddey doesn't get to close this game, besides being on the court there for the final inbound passes, so that doesn't count. But if you traded for Josh Giddey, and he can't close when Ayo's out, then I assumed he was going to close all the time when Ayo's out, because that's just logical. I didn't think that Lonzo Ball would be a guy that you're going to close with. So if he's a guy that you're going to close with, I don't think you should trade him. I just think they should keep him. I don't think you're going to get any value for him. Like, what are you going to get, like a second-round pick in 4 years that's protected based on how much time he plays or something like that? So I don't have any interest in trading Lonzo Ball. I think he's good for the future of the Bulls. Whatever that future is, just having that veteran presence, like we talk about this all the time in Chicago sports, it's kind of nauseating at this point, but culture comes up. And like Lonzo's the guy that when you think about the culture of the Bulls and what you want it to become, what you want Modest Buzelis to develop and what you want these guys to turn into, he's just someone I want to see more often. Another thing from tonight's game without Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams. I'm pretty confident in what he's doing right now. I would like to see him attacking the rim more too. I think he's playing good basketball. Like, I'm still not sure he's living up anywhere near the potential of what it was when the Bulls drafted him. But if he can be more actively involved in the offense, like we saw tonight, where he set a season high for threes with 5 of them in the game, he looks the most confident taking threes. At least rationally confident, I would say, taking threes. Like they're good shots that he's consistently taking. So I'm kind of looking forward to potentially what we're seeing, if Vooch and LaVine are in fact both traded, from watching a night like this versus the Hornets, like what would more Patrick Williams being more actively involved in the offense mean for his career, for the now and for the future for this team? To revisit the closing thing here for a second, because I want to talk about Josh Giddey. The Josh Giddey consistency stuff is a little fascinating. Like he was incredible, honestly, against Milwaukee. Like gets the triple-double, and he was good in tonight's game. I want to see more Josh Giddey with like the closing group as we're discussing here, though. Even with Lonzo on the team, like I still just don't get why you're trading for a guy that they're in pressure situations. You don't even want him on the court. I'd rather them lose, honestly, with Josh Giddey on the court than with them not out there, because to me, it's like, if you're going to pay this guy this offseason, don't you want to see what he can do? Like, or how could you even consider paying a guy like Josh Giddey if he's not going to be part of your closing situation against a team like the Charlotte Hornets? And I guess versus the Milwaukee Bucks, it was by default, or just the way he was playing that night, that Billy Donovan, maybe with Ayo out, is going to go based on more field. But if you think about it, without, LaVine and Vooch, like, what's your closing 5? And we're going to assume here for a second that Lonzo's not on the team either. So you're in a close game versus, the Hornets the next time you play them. Your closing 5 is what? Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith, Ayo, Coby White, and Giddey? Like, is that your closing 5 eventually, when you get to that point? And I don't know, like, it would make more sense to me. But Coby White and Josh Giddey, like what we saw in the Milwaukee game is, I'm surprised we didn't see more of it in this game. Is kind of the larger point of this segment. It's just that without LaVine out there, I just thought it would see them take both a more aggressive approach in this game. And that to me is the one part of this where if I'm Billy Donovan, like I just got to tell these guys, like, you just got to play a stylistically different game. Zach in the chat here brings up Julian Phillips. Yeah, that's definitely possible. I mean, he could be. It's like he was put in the starting lineup tonight, makes an impact on the game, like what, immediately, the first play of the game. Obviously, doesn't get a ton of minutes after that. Kind of interesting that, like, with the Lonzo dynamic, that because they don't want to start him, I guess, that Julian Phillips is in there and then really feels like he's limited in terms of the amount of minutes he's going to play. So that might be someone we see more of. It might be Dalen Terry that we see more of. I mean, Phillips only played 11 minutes. It's kind of weird as a starter, but you talk about plus minus. In 11 minutes, he's a minus 21 on the game tonight. Yikes. So he is the literally exact opposite. But the big reason why, just big picture, and really not big picture, but for tonight's game, why they won is what the bench brought you. Every single person on the bench was positive in the plus minus. They outscored the Charlotte Hornets by a significant margin from the bench points in this game. I mean, your bench points, let's see what they ended up here with tonight. They don't have them on here. But like they were outscoring Charlotte significantly. Like they're really the only success they had early on in this game. And we've seen Billy Donovan multiple times. We saw in the Boston game, like last week, that they went to the smaller group, the bench group, to try to bring in just a bunch more energy for the Bulls. So maybe that's what it's going to be more of. More Dalen Terry, more Julian Phillips, more Jalen Smith. And like that's what this future, potentially without Zach LaVine, is going to be like. But I hope that tonight is more of a, look, even if the Bulls are a bad team, which they likely will be, I mean, not likely, they will be, if they really unload all these guys successfully at the deadline, I hope we don't see a lot of games like this, where they're shooting 63s and making 18 of them. If they're going to play like this, stylistically, the Bulls will break the single game regular season record for most three-pointers in a game, which is currently held by the Houston Rockets. We've been on missed three-pointer watch record twice now already this season. If this is the way they're going to play without LaVine, without Vooch after the trade deadline, I wonder what kind of odds I could get on them hitting that, because frankly, I feel pretty comfortable that the Bulls will miss 47 threes in a game this year. So that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Bulls Postcast. Thanks for hanging out with us here live on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, appreciate you as always. Make sure you hit that subscribe button everywhere you can find us, and Locked On Sports. So the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel, the Locked On Bulls YouTube channel, they do daily content 5 days a week, especially great stuff around the trade deadline. Obviously, so much information and news coming out that they're hitting on a daily basis. And of course, the Locked On Bulls audio feed, where these shows are available for you immediately after we wrap up, pretty much within like 20 minutes. So if you're listening the next morning, you can always listen on your way to work on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. So that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Bulls Postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. My name's Joe George. We'll talk to you next time on Wednesday night after the Bulls play the Washington Wizards. So for now, peace.